Hi guys, and welcome to my presentation today on how to maximize return on investment from recruitment technology. My name's Adam, I'm the Chief Revenue Officer and one of the co-founders at SourceBreaker. SourceBreaker is an AI-driven search and match platform that helps over 600 recruitment agencies around the globe increase revenue per recruiter. First of all, I want to start to introduce you to an on-demand webinar series that we ran with 9 other industry-leading experts. And what we did in this series is really a snapshot of what you're going to get in today's presentation. We dissected down parts of the recruitment technology buying and implementing process and looked really at what is the very best practice, what do all of these businesses have learned from thousands of implementations that they've done, and when they recommend to clients how they should be implementing tech, how would they go about and do it, and what's the best practice. So we started originally with webinar 1, which was building the buzz. So this all looked and centered around how a successful tech adoption really starts long before the very first training session. And it's all around that meticulous planning and creating excitement before the very first training happens. It looks at how you define return on investment and some really interesting stories around how different businesses actually even talk about return on investment. We then moved on to webinar 2, which we called Dream Teams and Cheerleaders. This was all about getting your tech rollout off to a flying start, really looking at that first training sessions, the first few weeks onto a particular new platform, and how you really get the excitement to not only build before, but now carry through to the usage and adoption of your particular technology. How can you use gamification? How can you make it fun? How can you, get feedback from the users and make changes and alterations? And then in the final webinar, we then looked at how do you make sure that the tech implementation and purchase that you've made actually delivers long-term value for you as a business. Because you've just invested heavily into this new piece of technology for the next 3 to 5 years. You don't want a spike of activity right at the start. You want long-term value. So it looks at why sometimes is the adoption high at the start, but how do you stop the novelty wearing off? It looks at celebrating successes from that piece of technology and actually identifying what does good look like. So for those of you who want to dig into each of these, there's going to be a link at the end of the video. If you want to watch the whole series, then it takes you right through the process from selecting all the way to delivering long-term value. So today's agenda. So we're going to start off looking at that pre-implementation phase that we visited in webinar 1. We're then going to move on and talk about the training and onboarding, and then finish with the long-term value. And I'm going to close the presentation just looking at some of the red flags that you really need to avoid within your tech implementations. So, key steps and action points. Pre-implementation. So for those of you who've talked to me about this topic previously will know that this is my favorite part of any tech adoption, because I think this is the most crucial part to getting it right, but usually the most overlooked by a lot of businesses. And the first tip that I'm going to give is really about planning meticulously. So really understanding what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, and all of the resources that you're going to need to be able to make it work. Second, let's have a success strategy call. So different suppliers will call it different things, but this is what we call it at SourceBreaker. So this is a call between the leadership of the business and the person who's going to deliver your training. So in our particular case, the customer success manager or the onboarding specialist. And what we do here is we really make sure there's great alignment between the person who's delivering the training and what business objectives you are doing. So throughout the sales process, you'll have shared lots of information with the salesperson. But what we want to make sure is, 1, none of that information is missed. And 2, really now you've selected the software, we're driving it to reach your business goals. Third, let's sell the dream to users. And if I could just take one tip from this entire presentation, this would be the one. So selling the dream really builds the excitement from the users that are going to do it. You can do this in many different ways. So depending on the size of your organization, actually get the users involved in the demo process so they can see the technology that they're going to be utilizing. You can have the supplier create a video, such as this, in really working out, why have you purchased it? Why are the business metrics that you're looking to drive, and what is it ultimately going to do to them? So last week I got a question, which is, we've got a lot of business, goals and things that we're trying to deliver on, and then we're looking at tech for that, but why does the user care? And this is the part where you can really distill down what you're doing to why does the user care. So if you're wanting to automate part of your processes to speed up your business so you can increase revenue, then you can distill that right down to your managers, because the more revenue that they create for their teams, the more bonuses and team commissions that they will earn. So it's great for your managers. And then distill that right down to a recruiter in your business, because if they can automate processes, they can speed themselves up, they can make more deals, then ultimately they can make more commission. And this is the opportunity to really distill exactly what this technology is going to do for you and give it right to that user and what it's going to do for them. Allocating enough resource. So probably the biggest red flag to look at this point when we look at red flags is making sure that you've really truly understood exactly what it takes to implement this piece of technology. So have you understood the amount of hours of both training time, leadership time, deliberation time, time to actually embed it, time to look at it in meetings, to drive it throughout your business? Or have you just thought about it in terms of the actual revenue and a pound amount that you're going to spend on this piece of technology? So don't underestimate it. And finally, before we get going with actually selecting and implementing, have you defined the return on investment that you want to get? So this whole presentation is on how to make you maximize the return on investment that you're getting for it. But if we don't understand exactly what we are trying to get, then we're never going to be able to maximize the return on investment that we get. So one thing here I just want to note is that return on investment doesn't always need to get stuck on a pound amount. There's a business that I work with in Ireland, and their whole return on investment philosophy is all around recruiter satisfaction and adoption, because they've identified that if their recruiters love the piece of technology that they like, and they really want to utilize that tech stack and be more efficient with it, then they will increase their retention. So they'll stay at the business longer. And in verse, that retention will then produce more revenue for the business. So rather than purely thinking about it as that piece of technology has made me 100 grand, they're looking at it against their retention of their internal staff based on a happiness and adoption metric. So again, very different way of looking at it. So we've selected the piece of technology, we've done our pre-implementation, we've planned, we've worked out exactly what we're doing, we've come up with a plan. We're now actually going to the training and onboarding. So first thing, really commit to this. So you'll have mapped out in the pre-implementation phase now, because you've had these tips, exactly what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. So now's not the time to take your foot off the gas. Now's the time to double down and really commit to this piece of technology and the implementation of it. Let's get a senior leader in the room. So that could either be yourself as part of the C-suite or one of your senior managers, directors. And this is really crucial. So we had a business based in London, in New York, and in Germany who did this really, really well. They actually had one of the founders of the business who sat in the training room for every single session. And I realized for some people that's not going to be possible, but for them, it really drove their tech implementation and their adoption. And the key thing here is, one, it holds your recruiters accountable to actually make sure that they are paying attention and giving everything its all in the training. But two, as somebody who's selected the technology or a leader that understands why you've bought it and why you're implementing it, they're the perfect person to sell back the feature that the trainer has just mentioned into your business. So for example, we're showing this particular feature and then the leader can say, so in the company meeting last week, we were talking about how we need to get more candidates at interview. And this particular tool is going to help us with that thing that we were talking about. So it really makes it real for the users and embeds it into you as a business. Why are we investing in this piece of technology? Look at splitting down the training and the launching of these pieces of software. So at SourceBreaker, we call it a split launch. We look at half the platform on one day, half the platform on the next day. You want this in bite-sized pieces. You don't want a recruiter off the training floor for 3 hours, sitting in a session, trying to learn everything about this technology. One, it's a waste of productivity because they should be at their desk making phone calls. But two, no one retains information for that long. So split it down into lots of bite-sized pieces. Competitions. I don't know a recruiter out there that's not competitive, or I'm yet to see one. Anyone comment for anyone that they know who's not. But introduce competitions and really get that competitive juice of the recruiters flowing. So we do things with, depending on the business metric that you're trying to drive, again, link this competition to that. So if you're looking for more CV sends, or you're looking for people to be really great at utilizing, the actual system, so uploading data, put the competition around the action and the activity that you're trying to do. There's a really good book, and I'll put the actual the notes in with this video, called Drive by Daniel Pink, and it all talks around if you incentivize the right actions, then you get the right results. So check it out if you haven't. And finally, make it bespoke. So look at actually bespoking the training to suit your business. So there's going to be a caveat to this when we look at the red flags, but the key here is using the right language. So if you call it a D job, then make sure the trainer's aware that it's a D job and you're going to use it. If it is a CV send, make sure they're utilizing that type of language. So that when they talk in the training room, they're talking the right colloquial of your business. And finally, looking at delivering long-term value. So this is probably, as much as I love the pre-implementation phase, ultimately the most important, because you've invested in this technology as something that's part of your tech stack for the next 3 to 5 years. So ultimately you need it to not just work this year, but continue to work year after year. So start with actually defining what success looks like. So again, it almost goes back to that ROI point from the pre-implementation phase. What is successful? And how much adoption do we really need? How much ROI do we really need for this to be a successful project? Make sure you keep up to date on what's new. So the very best technology providers are constantly updating their software. We at SourceBreaker push a release every 3 weeks. And I'm not saying that's going to be huge features every 3 weeks, but we are tweaking and playing and toying with something that's enhancing the user's experience every single 3 weeks. So make sure that you're up to date with what the supplier you're working with is actually doing. The amount of conversations, and we need to be better at this even at SourceBreaker with our suppliers, that I have with people, and it's not until 6 months later that they go, Adam, I didn't even realize you guys were doing this. And they're current clients. So make sure you keep up to date with what people are doing, because for the technology you bought 2-3 years ago, it's probably very different to the technology that it is now. They'll have a lot of enhancements, a lot of new features. So keep up to date with that. Talking about the tech into your company meetings. So a couple of clients that I know, they actually have a slide on their all hands meeting each week that highlights the best users of their tech stack up in front of the whole business. I love that idea because it really puts front and center not only like the right type of behaviors, but then it gives you an opportunity to share the successes from it as well. So they'll highlight that this particular person's just made a placement from using a feature of SourceBreaker or a feature of another piece of technology that they use. And that news travels fast, and good news really starts to roll across the business. And that's what then people want to emulate. They want to have that success themselves, and they want to make those billings. Looking at who is responsible long term. So I said, let's get a senior leader in the room, and I very, very believe that it is for senior leadership within a business to always be responsible for the core tech stack. Because, after your office space and people, or potentially it's even overtaking office space these days, it's probably one of the biggest costs within your business is technology now. So you need to make sure that it is really crucial and it is top of mind. But if as a senior leader or an owner of a business, you don't have the time to be fully responsible for it, then who is? And making somebody fully accountable and actually deliver and drive this within your business is not only going to help you guys internally, but it's also going to help the supplier because they'll know who they need to go to get their assistance for any new rollouts, for any new training, for any new features. And keeping that consistency, again, is really key with that. And finally, talk to your suppliers. So have a look at what's new, find all that stuff out, but talk about what's going well, what's not going well. So we call it an EBR, Enterprise Business Review here at SourceBreaker, but make sure you keep that communication going. Because if something isn't quite working, generally, it's just a little tweak that they need to make, or it's just a piece of training that they need to redeliver. Your business changes as much as our businesses change and our software changes. So make sure we're up to date with all of those changes and what you're trying to do, because in that way we can deliver the very best long-term value for you as an organization. So now the red flags. So I've given you all the positive steps you can do, and now's my little opportunity to tell you all the things that you shouldn't, but people still do. So first one, moving away from the supplier's methodology. So I have this conversation with people all the time and I say, look, we offer X number of training sessions here at SourceBreaker for a particular business. It all depends on the size and scale and teams and everything like that. If I could get away with running less training sessions, I would. Because commercially, as a business owner, if I could do half the training sessions, I'd save half the cost in terms of the amount of training and delivery that I'm doing to your business. But the reason that we've identified that you need that many training sessions or that many calls or that many, whichever, is because we've identified that is what's going to make you successful. So definitely bespoke, as we talked before, and use the right language, but don't try and move away from the supplier's methodology too far. Second, not actually allowing enough time to really do this. And it's part of that commit, it's part of adding enough resource, but understanding truly what is this tech implementation going to take is something that people get wrong all the time. Making sure that people, are fully attentive. So making sure consultants aren't on the phone, they're not taking calls, they're not interrupting the training flow, Again, it's part of that committal thing. We see too many times that people, say, oh, right, we've got this training session, but this person can't make it, this person can't make it. If you're going to do this, this is a business change, and this is something you're doing to really generate more revenue and push your business forward, so commit to it. Having the right equipment in the training room sounds really basic, but, is everybody set up? Now we're talking about Zoom or Teams or Google Hangouts. Has everyone got their cameras on? Is everybody all over it? Making sure that main decision maker doesn't step back too early from the process. So great to hand it over to somebody and make it their responsibility, but keep involved as much as you can. That's a big tip. Stay involved as much as you can. Not keeping up with the evolutions of the technology. So, really letting what it was when you bought it guide you to what the only thing that they do. Technology evolves so quickly. Looking at new users being trained purely internally. So I have a big belief here that the new user into your business should have the same experience as when you rolled out a technology. So we train all of the new users who come onto SourceBreaker from our training team here in the business, because I think that they should have that exact same experience as when a particular company bought our technology and rolled it out. And then finally is really that lack of activity and return tracking. So people just buying it, implementing it, and leaving it. That's never going to be successful. It will generate revenue for your business. It will push your business forward, but you're not going to be able to optimize and get the most out of it. And really, that's what you want. We don't want to be buying technology just to move the needle a little bit. We want to be buying this technology to make big steps forward in our business. And if we don't track who's using it, who's not using it, and why, and we don't understand actually what are the returns we're getting, whenever we look at those different ROI metrics, then ultimately we're not going to be able to communicate to the supplier correctly, we're not going to be able to communicate into our business correctly, and we're not going to be able to get the very max ROI out of our technology purchase. So that's everything from me today. Scan the QR code within the deck right now to be able to access the webinar series. As you can probably tell from this presentation, and anyone who's seen me talk around this before, it's a topic I'm hugely passionate about. So if anybody wants to just pick up the phone, speak to me about potential pitfalls that they're looking at or different tech stacks that they're doing, then please get in contact. My email address is adam@sourcebreaker.com, and it'd be lovely to speak to you.